And just really quick before you do that, I'm sorry to interrupt, but on your watch, could I have you pull that and just kind of sit up to the side here? The microphone's getting the click of your seconds hand.
Really?
Uh-huh.
That's how good.
I
can't hear it. You got a very sensitive microphone.
Hello, everyone out there, and welcome back to StreetPX, a photography podcast. It is Tuesday, February 20th, and we're about to get into another awesome interview. As always, I am Casper.
And this is Jim. How are you, Casper?
Doing great. It's been a crazy beginning of the year. I know before the show, me and you were talking about kind of being busier than we anticipated.
Yeah, you know, life happens. You know, that's basically it. You know, and I to be honest, I haven't done any real street shooting in a couple of months now, but I got to get back into it, man.
You know, it's sad to admit, but yeah, I'm kind of in that same boat.
Yeah.
Beginning of the year had me flip over into pro mode, and that means like taking gigs and,
That's right.
and shooting what everybody else wants.
Yeah, street photography is a passion, but it's not a paycheck.
No, it's not. No, it's not. But it never. One should never, complain about having work. It's better to have more work than you can handle than less work than you need.
That's right, man. Exactly.
But it's all good things, all amazing things.
That's right.
And I know on my side of the coin, it's been about teaching and just kind of spreading that photographic knowledge around. I actually got a workshop coming up in Mexico in April.
Oh, is that? Yeah. Well, April when? What? Yeah, you got the date set yet?
Yes, actually going to be that second week of April. I'm going to be running, I think I have to double check my notes because right now I'm a bit of a mixed bag. My brain's in knots, but that one should be from the, I think, 10th through 12th. And I'm going to put a link up into the show notes. But,
Excellent.
We're going to be down in Querétaro with actually a friend of our show, Ricardo.
Ricardo, yeah.
Yep. So me and him are going to be tag teaming and taking people down through those historic streets and just talking shop, man. It's going to be a lot of fun.
Great.
Yep.
Wish I could join you guys down there, man.
Yeah. See, if you're up here in America, this is an opportunity or at least an excuse to do an excursion workshop. So wink, wink, nudge, nudge. Go check out the link.
Cool.
Well, I mean, besides that, let's jump into some plugs real quick. The first one I want to drop is Street Photo because It's that time of year to start throwing that out there.
That's right, man. And it's so much fun. This will be the third annual, right?
Third annual, which is kind of hard to believe because I remember when Ken was just talking about, hey, this might be a cool idea. And then now it's just ballooned into one of the biggest festivals, street photography festivals in the world, particularly here in the United States, obviously.
That's right. I mean, Ken Walton is the man. And he put this together. You know, this was his baby, brought it up from ground. And we had Bruce Gilden last year. Yeah. Love him or hate him. He was there, you know, and man, it was fantastic.
Yep, yeah. I'm glad you put it that way. Love him or hate him, he's still the man. So
that's right, he is the man.
But it's not just about street photo. Jim, I know you got a couple of them to drop too.
Oh yeah, there was I just saw where the Italian Street Festival, Street Photography Festival in Rome is going to be in April 13th to 15th. So I know our good friend of our show, Rosa Wolf, might be showing up there. You know, she's in Rome. Maybe she can be our foreign correspondent and let us know how it went if she attends it, man.
Oh, I'm liking that idea. We can do like a daily show, senior correspondent.
Yeah, exactly. You know, we can get out there, have her reporting from the field. Man, this is awesome. Or this sucks with, whatever, but hey. Who knows?
I like that idea.
Yeah.
You know what,
yeah.
Rosa, if you're listening out there, get in touch with us. Let's talk a little bit. See if we can get some extended reportage going on.
Make you a broadcaster.
Yes. And I think there's another festival. Is it?
There's the Out of Chicago event that
yes.
this will be I think the 5th annual one coming up. That'll be in early June. Late June. I'm sorry, June 22nd through 24th. And while it covers all photography, it's really heavy on street photography because last year they had Marie Lagneau, who was on our show, Valerie Jardin, who was on our show, James Mayer, who we hope to get on our show later, and Steve Simon. So
wow.
they had those guys they had those guys on a panel, and then they had photo walks and everything related to street photography. So if you're interested, you guys are interested, go and check out of Chicago.
Mm-hmm.
It is a fantastic thing. And like I said, it's just not street photography either. It's all kinds of photography. So
yeah, especially for the people that's, aspiring photographers, people that want to set up their own business or, go into it commercially. It's a great opportunity to go and get some inspiration, talk to professionals and seasoned veterans. Let me put it that
exactly.
way.
And I'm glad you brought that up because one of the key things that a lot of photographers out there don't do is network.
Right.
I mean, it is so important to get out there and talk to other photographers and network. It's just a key thing if you want to develop a business or just develop a longevity in photography.
Yeah,
network.
Yeah, in many cases, pound for pound, network sometimes is heavier than the money you get because
that's right.
Networking can get you more jobs. So
that's right. Exactly. You ain't lying, brother.
Right on. Cool. Well, I mean that's great for the plugs. I hope anybody that's out, and maybe making their way to Rome or heading to Chicago, or definitely keep in mind street photo here in the Bay Area. Needless to say, there are festivals going on all kinds of places throughout the year. It is advantageous for you to at least zone in on one and go to that one. I know it's costly to travel to some of these places, but maybe pick one, and any of these are wonderful options.
That's right.
Yeah. But need to throw out some love to our wonderful sponsor, Glass Key Photo.
Course.
Yes,
of course.
As we do. So, yes, big love to Gordon and Matt over there in San Francisco. Glass Key is your analog photography store for the Bay Area. So if you're looking for repairs on any of your old Minoltas, maybe an AE1, your Olympus OMs, that's a place to go and get these things taken care of. You need a CLA, that's which many of us that shoot film, it's kind of like an oil change. You forget to do that, or you just say, I won't do it. And then when you do get the camera cleaned up, you'll be amazed at how good it will be running. So that's an option that you could do, or just go and buy some film. But nevertheless, they are located at 1230 Sutter Street, open from 12 p.m. to 6 p.m. every single day, and ran by two guys that just won't give up.
Yeah, I mean, you can meet a couple of more knowledgeable guys in analog shooting. I mean, they are fantastic, friendly, and they can almost convert a digital guy like me into doing a lot more film photography. Man.
You ain't lying. I would love to get me a Rolly right now. That's completely out of left field. But I was at a birthday party yesterday, and somebody was showing me their new shiny, and it was a Roleo Flex 2.8, and I was just like fell in love with that thing.
Oh man, what birthday parties do you go to?
It was a good one.
Yeah.
But yeah, go and check those guys out and say hi from all of us here at StreetPX. Additionally, if you are digging the show, we would love some support because it helps us keep our bandwidth flowing and keeps our equipment running. A big thank you to everybody again, all of our Patreon contributors, because over the course of the last about year and a half, ever since we started our Patreon account, we've had a number of you wonderful listeners jump in there and subscribe and offer us up, a couple of bucks, $5, $10 a month, whatever you're comfortable with. And that money helped go toward expanding our system here. So we were able to buy a new system, some new mics to kind of help our clarity, help our voices sound a little bit more silky. Or at least Jim's, maybe.
Oh man, yeah, because mine needs a lot of help.
But yes, that helps a great deal. So if you do want to support us, go over to patreon.com/StreetPX, and you get rewards for your contributions. We offer up prints and T-shirts and free bonus content and all those goodies. Additionally, when I just said T-shirts, we just added a number of designs to the StreetPX merchandise store. So we are Hell, Jim, I think we're at 30 some odd designs for T-shirts over there now.
Jeez, that is awesome, man. That really is.
Ever expanding. And if we don't have a camera that you want, definitely reach out to us at contact@streetpx.com and let us know what camera that you enjoy shooting with or that you might have grown up with, and we'll design it up and throw it on a T-shirt for you.
Yeah, hey, you know what? I'm going to have to get a T-shirt for my new D850.
Oh, D850. You know what? I might make an exception here, and and make a digital camera T-shirt.
Yeah, you. Hey, man, come on. Yeah, I want my T-shirt. I'm gonna order it up.
Yes.
Order it up.
I'll have to design that one up.
Okay,
but most importantly, enough with all that stuff. We want to get into this show because this is a very, very special episode.
Yes.
Jim, who we got in here?
We have Somerstein.
Yes.
Stephen Somerstein.
And if you don't know that name, you know his pictures, whether you think you do or don't. Stephen actually was one of the photographers on the ground during the Selma to Montgomery march with Martin Luther King and Lewis and that whole crew.
Yes, and you like Casper said, you know the pictures. If you don't know the name, you know those images. I mean, from the early '60s, mid '60s. Oh,
yep. And I'm going to pull a Jim here and describe a picture real quick. Just
do that.
If you've ever seen the image, well, you have. Maybe even subconsciously you remember it, but it's a reverse picture from the back of Dr. King's head as he's given the speech there. And that was Stephen, and we had such an amazing sit down and talk with this man, and he is just a ball of stories. Just it's like the mass of a dying star all kind of rolled into this little package, and when we wound him up, it was difficult to stop him, and that was because we mostly didn't want to stop him.
That's right. We want to keep you. As a matter of fact, we just want to grab him and just take him to a coffee shop and just talk for hours. Yeah. I mean, even after the show, because that's how good it was. So you guys hold on. This is going to be a great ride for you.
But I must give a word of caution. It's going to be a long ride. When we sat down with Steve, we ended up going for multiple hours. Just because it was so amazing just to hear him describe everything he went through. And so this is actually going to be our first split episode. It's going to be a part 1 and a part 2. So we're going to be, this episode is our part 1, obviously, and we're going to release another episode next week that is going to continue this discussion because it's just too good, and I refuse to remove any information, and I refuse to put any of this behind a bonus material situation.
Right. I agree.
Yep. And apologies if you're hearing a buzz. It sounds like I think the CIA is over top of the house.
See, that's what you get for doing that. I told you not to do that.
Yeah, they're coming for me. I'm on those watch lists. Anyway, cool. So enough of us kind of bantering back and forth. Let's get into this interview with Mr. Somerstein and hear his stories. This is amazing. Stick with us here.
I'll give you a sense of my schooling and also the genesis of my photography.
Okay.
Basically, my college career began in New York at City College in New York, which is now part of the City University of New York, but then was a top-level independent college and very difficult to get into and pretty much a remarkable cauldron of intellectual and democratic values. I got into the school in 1959 and very quickly became interested in journalism and photography in the school. I was majoring in physics, which eventually was my degree. But I actually spent more time working on my photography than doing research experiments. Although I was doing research experiments, I tended to think of that as, well, that's my major. But the fun stuff is doing photography. I was eventually head of the photo club at the college. And then...
That's a wild contrast.
Yeah.
There's both sides of the brain kind of fighting one another there.
Well, I got started in photography for technical reasons, not for aesthetic or intellectual reasons. I first saw my camera. The first camera I saw was a Brownie Hawkeye Kodak camera. And I was fascinated by the shutter and the mechanism and the technology of cameras. And I would take them apart and try to figure out how they worked. And I wanted to find out, this film becomes photosensitive. How does that work? So I got a kit that I bought with my allowance that I could develop film and then make contact prints. And I'd be doing that in my closet. And I said, you can take pictures. And the first pictures were meant just to test the technology and see how it worked. Then I said, you can take pictures of interesting things. How do you know that something is interesting? How do you know that it's a good picture?
Mm-hmm. Right.
Well, I was about 10 years old, and my mother sensed that I was getting interested in something in the arts, and she gets me a membership at the Museum of Modern Art in New York. And all of a sudden, I had this free pass to just wander around through the hallways of this museum. And in those days, the Museum of Modern Art in New York was a small five-story building.
Kind of a small place, yeah.
And it was a quiet place, especially during the daytime hours when people were working.
Right.
And I would wander down. I'd take the subway, which in those days was a much different kind of New York. Yeah. And there I was, a 10, 11, 12-year-old,
doing this by
subway,
yourself?
Go myself, sure, no problem at all.
New York was a different time. That's true.
Different time, different place. You didn't think about, strange people doing things. It just didn't exist. Right. So I'd head down there and wander the hallways, just looking at the art. And I was slowly developing opinions about what makes a good painting and what makes a good photograph. And I would develop, I was always a contrary youngster. And my mother, when she first took me to the museum, there was a painting. You have to realize this is a museum of modern art. And so I was being introduced to modern art. And one day she takes me and there was this painting on a wall, and it was a white rectangle inside a slightly darker rectangle. And it was called White on White. And I turned to my mother, I looked at it, and I said, "So?"
The answer to quite a few modern art pieces.
Yes. And, I was very skeptical of much of the work in the museum, but I was extraordinarily attracted to the photography department. Mm-hmm. And they had one of the earliest photography departments in the United States in a museum. John Sarkowski and others were there, and I think there would be Stieglitz, Steichen, I think, may have been head of it at the time. And in those days, you could go into the photography department, and if you had seen a particular work that had been on the wall, you could walk in and they would sit you down at the table, and you'd say, "Oh, I saw that Edward Weston. I'd like to see it." And they'd give you 2 gloves, and someone would go out, and they'd come back, and they'd put the photograph in front of you.
You end up in prison. You try that right
now. What? And in those days, they felt that under guided circumstances, you could look at and handle original works of art. This is much less true today.
Right. Taking more of a textile approach.
this was true for many years. Years later, when I went up to Harvard, I was at the Harvard Observatory. I'd wander over to the Fogg Art Museum, and they had a very nice photo collection and print collection, and you could do exactly the same thing. This was back in the 1960s, 70s, and I'd say, "Oh, there's a nice print by so and so. I'd like to see it," and they'd give you pair of gloves, you'd sit down at the table, and out would come the work, and you could look at it very directly. It was a much more intimate attitude.
I'd like to see Oakland Museum try that with like the Dorothea Lange stuff.
Yeah.
Head over to Oakland, and you can, maybe they'll do that.
Maybe.
I don't know. But anyway, this museum became like a second home to me. On the 5th floor of the museum was the members' lounge, top floor, and there was a restaurant there, and literally a lounge with soft chairs. And across the street from the library, from the museum, was the Donnell Library, one of the main larger libraries in the New York Public Library system. So when I was doing my homework, by the time I got to high school, I was getting serious homework. I would work in the library and then walk across the street and bring some of it with me. And I'd sit up in the lounge doing my homework. And then after an hour or two, I'd say, "Time for an art visit." And I'd fold up my stuff, put it in my little valise, and I'd walk down and see what the exhibits were at the time.
Do you recall any of the exhibits that you had seen? Any of them that stuck with you?
Oh, well, when I first saw some of Edward Weston's work and Gene Smith and Eric, some of the great photographers that I saw there and other places, with Eric Salomon, I was always quite taken with the journalistic photographers. Though I admired the aesthetics of, Ansel Adams,
right,
and that movement, and even the predated the pictorial movement that went before them. What really excited me was street photography. That is capturing events that were happening at that moment, but capturing it in a way that had a dynamism to it, a beautiful structure about it. So Dorothea Lange, the people from the Farm Security Administration, tremendous effect on me. Lange especially, because of the aesthetics of so many of her photographs, Migrant Woman and others, which I have copies of. Fortunately, I had the smarts, at least in a few cases, to contact the Library of Congress. It turns out that all those pictures that we think of, the great farm security pictures, are in the Library of Congress.
Oh, public domain?
They're in the public domain. And back in the 60s and 70s, before digital technology came about, you could contact the library and say, "I like that picture of Dorothea Lange," and they would pull out the negative and make you a print.
Oh.
From Dorothea's original?
From the original negatives.
We need to go back in time.
Yeah.
Whoa.
We always ask people to go back in time to shoot something. I want to go back in time to get some of these images.
Yeah.
Well, once I realized, I didn't do it as much as I normally would, but the Migrant Mother was one that I really liked, and also some stuff by Arthur Rothstein. There's this famous shot of a dust storm and a family trying to reach their home during the dust storm. And I, called up the chief printer at the Library of Congress, who was doing, in those days, it was not that difficult. You'd find out who's the printer, and you get on the phone. And he says, "Well, what paper are you printing on? We'd have this I want a really good print of this." And, "Oh, okay, Mr. Somerstein." I was just, in college, and having a nice discussion about the quality of the print, and he would print these beautiful prints for me, 16 by 20 inch, prints, and I still have them at home.
Mm-hmm. From the original negative.
From the original negative.
Oh my goodness.
Holy shit. That's insane.
Oh,
that's priceless.
Think about that.
Well, you have to realize not too many people did what I did in those days.
Well,
they weren't that, though the information was available, it wasn't like it was on the web.
Right.
Yeah. Because, everyone can do this.
And it's not common knowledge that you can either, I'm assuming.
No, it wasn't common knowledge. And it, museums had different policies, but the Library of Congress was far more open in that sense. Once it was in the public domain, they would make it available to you. And if you did what I did, which is call up the man who would be handling the printing, and you say, let's make this a good print, and not just a knockoff, a glossy type of thing.
Can you throw it in a frame for me?
Almost. But, he loved the fact that someone was taking an interest in the quality. And you essentially wanted a really top-level exhibition quality. But you'd pay him a little bit more, and they'd make it exhibition quality.
Mm-hmm. So be it.
So during all that period, I was developing a sense of the quality of the images. Years before this event took place, I used to hang around Greenwich Village when I was in my teen years. It was the place to go to. And photography was just beginning to be recognized as an art form.
So we're talking about the mid-50s you're talking about?
Actually, in this case, we're moving from the 50s to the 60s.
Okay.
Just slightly predating Selma. Yep.
Early 60s, I was essentially going to art events, shows, magicians. The village was this melange of so many different cultures and things. Mm-hmm. And I thought of it as a great experimental place to test my photography. I had seen a lot of the work of Versailles doing night, Paris at night and things. And I said, I'd like to do Greenwich Village at night, try to photograph. And I was doing a lot of handheld stuff, very difficult to do with films. I was experimenting with pushing film to higher ASAs and things to try to get the shots. And I wanted to photograph entertainers while they were performing. And I was doing this all on my own, and I heard that there was a little photography group that would meet in over on Bank Street, which is one of the West Village streets. And I wandered over there, and I found this remarkable club. And what was remarkable about it was totally different than any other photography club. Turns out that at this moment in time in the history of this club, which was the Village Camera Club, virtually all the members were editors and writers of the photography magazines in New York. Mm-hmm. Somehow they formed this group and taken over the Village Camera Club, and this became their meeting ground. And these were the Bill Pierce and many of the, I can't even remember all the names of the editors, but these were popular photography, Camera 35, modern photography. And these were the writers and editors that would meet there. And then monthly, they would invite what they thought was an important, well-known photographer to come by and talk about their work, how they did it. And that's how I first met some of the well-known photographers of the day.
It's kind of who's who of photography in the 60s.
Oh, well,
yeah.
One time, actually, how I met him, this photographer was actually not in the club, but because of one of the editors. I had come there one day, and I think it was Bill Pierce. Anyway, he says, Steve, you got to get over to the Limelight Gallery. Now, Limelight Gallery over on Sheridan Square was one of the first photography galleries in the city. But in order to make money, the woman who ran it, they had to have a cafe attached to the gallery because no gallery would ever make the rent. It just, wasn't possible to do that. Photographs were selling for $10, $15, $20, $30, something like that. And these were well-known photographers. Anyway, Pierce says, get over to Limelight. And I said, who's there? He says, just go over there and see who it is. He wanted to surprise me. So I wandered over a few blocks away, walked over to the Sheridan Square, and there was Limelight. And I walked in the middle of the daytime, and there were the big whiteboards that you always see in the galleries that they position the photographs. And I didn't see anyone at first. I walked in, and I just see the whiteboards, and there's some photographs mounted. And I walk up to the first one, and I said, to myself, I didn't see anyone there, so I'm sort of talking to myself. And I said, oh, that's a nice print. I like that. And I walked to the next one. Oh, that's a very nice print. And as I saw these prints there, I became much more enthusiastic. I thought they were extraordinarily beautiful prints. And a head pokes its way around one of the boards, and this face comes out, a little slightly bearded guy. And he says, you like it? And I said, very much so. Yours? He says, yeah. I said, I'm Steve Somerstein. Put out my hand. He says, I'm Gene Smith.
What'd you get?
And this was, one of the top photojournalists during World War II.
Yeah.
And afterwards,
Yes.
Minnie Mata, an incredible photographer. And he says, want to buy one? I said, how much? He says, $35. I said, Gene, I said, if I had $35 right now, to be honest with you, I'd be buying print paper. And he looked at me and he cracked up and he said, so would I.
Oh my God.
I mean, these are pictures that probably worth $10, $20, $30, $40,000 today. Yeah. But these were the early days when he was beginning to show in New York. Mm-hmm. And
well, as you said, it's also kind of the infancy stage of when photography is actually being respected as an art form.
Exactly. In those days, the concept that anything could be reproduced somehow diminished its value as art. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And that's why people developed the concept of limited editions and things. Mm-hmm. It was all to give a sense this is, a self-contained limited series of prints. But that's what photographs sold for in those days, $35, $45. It wasn't thought of as being a collectible in that sense. Most photographers traded amongst each other. Mm-hmm. I like your print, do it. I used to trade some of my photographs to my camera repair man. My camera repairman was a guy named Marty Forscher, who did all the repair work for Life magazine. Mm-hmm. And that in itself was a fun little story in my mind. My father was in the motion picture industry, worked when I was younger for 20th Century Fox in New York. He was a film editor and cutter and stuff like that. Later on, he started his own independent operation on 46th Street, which was an area of independent filmmakers. It was very big in those days. People who do documentary films and short films and things. And the street, 46th Street was filled with Duart films and all these different companies, which was one block over from the Diamond District, which was 47th Street. And, you know, one day my camera was having some problems, and I asked one of my father's friends, I said, where do you fix cameras? You know, I recommend it. Oh, you got to go over to Marty Forscher on 47th Street, you know, on the 9th floor. I said, is he good? I said, just go there, you know. So wander over, go to the 9th floor, walk in, very busy place with all sorts of people moving back and forth, all technical equipment, optical equipment. I said, interesting place. I sit down and just waited. I said, well, before I talk to anyone, I just wanted to take in the environment.
Size it up.
A guy comes in and he says, is Mr. Avedon's camera ready? And I said, then another guy comes in and says, oh, is Mr. Penn's camera ready? And I said, I'm in the right place.
Oh my God.
That's one of those moments when you're sizing somebody up and you never look down, you just keep looking further and further up.
Well, it was one of these really happenstances that when you explain it to people, it's hysterically funny, but it really happened exactly like that.
Yeah.
And it was sort of like learning about it. So finally I got up and walk over to the counter, and Marty Forscher was there, and I said, hey kid, you know, what are you here for? You know, and I brought up my camera to show to him, and I had this Rolleiflex I had just bought a few weeks before, and it was not quite right. And I said, could you take a look at this? So he says, hey kid, where you going to school? And I said, City College. My alma mater.
Oh,
I said,
nice.
oh, this is good.
Definitely.
you got it in right there.
Right there.
Common ground.
So he looks at the camera, you know, and he quickly takes a tool and unscrews the taking lens. It's a double lens reflex camera, one to look through, one to shoot. He unscrews it right out of the camera, puts it in an optical bench, and which tests the optical quality of the lens. And he says, not that good. And he opens up a drawer, and I saw like 100 identical lenses of mine. It was a 75 millimeter Tessar, you know, lens, and it was like 100 of them just lined up there.
It's
and
like
he picks
stock.
one out, puts it on the test bench. No, not good enough. And he goes through 4 or 5 of them until he gets one. Oh, this is good. And he looks at it. Oh, that's nice. Screws it back into my camera, and he says, now you got a good camera, kid. And I said, how much? You're a city man. That's okay. No problem.
Wow.
Oh man.
You're getting your tuition's worth on that.
Definitely. But yeah, I used him for years and years. I mean,
Yeah.
This is one of these remarkable individuals. He used to build cameras for the special effects that Life would use for when they do the Olympics and all this. I mean, this was almost like an old-fashioned guild, you know, with all these different levels of technology that they would invent there.
Being such a historically significant place, is there a store still at the same location, or
Well,
do you know?
I don't know if it survived because Marty has since
Of course,
gone.
yeah.
Right.
And I know he handed it off to his employees. Whether that shop still exists, I don't know. These days, with cameras being so electronic, the ability of independent repair shops to exist is minimal now today because you virtually have to send it back to
the original manufacturer
to work. I have not really checked out the history of what followed, over the next 20, 30, 40 years.
Plus, you had moved away by this point.
Yes, I moved out to the West Coast. So,
right.
Don't forget, the transition from film to digital was sort of in the 90s and early 2000 there. And I watched old-fashioned camera repair shops
come and go,
disappear. I was living in Mountain View, and we had a store that specialized in Leicas, repairing these were expatriate German guys, and
the one that recently closed, right? They had the big Leica collection,
California Avenue.
Oh no, that's
Palo Alto.
That's Palo Alto.
That's Palo Alto,
and
right?
Chucker. And they closed up, unfortunately.
Right.
They actually owned the building and everything, but they just didn't see the economics.
Right. Yeah.
There.
I think Gasser's the same
talked
thing.
to some. It was fabulous place.
Yeah.
Their Leica collection was.
Yeah, that's when you say Leica. That's right.
Oh, he had a great camera. Not only Leicas, but he had it stretching all over the walls.
The place was like a museum in and of itself whenever you went.
You're talking Mountain View, something shop in Mountain View.
Mountain View, this was in Mountain View. It was a small little shop. I walked in one day, and I saw all these older Leicas disassembled and displayed, with the intricate parts, and you would admire like a watch being taken apart.
Yeah.
They were showing what went into the camera, and I said, "Oh, this is
it's like the blowout illustrations,
exactly
which are
expanded." And I start talking, and I realize these are immigrant, guys, probably back then in the 80s. They may have been, post World War II, type of age, but they were all elderly guys doing the camera repair work, and they just knew their way around.
Yeah.
Leicas. They do other cameras, but they specialize. So I brought in my old Leicas, that I had, to spiff them up. And I said, this may be the last time I have a chance to do this.
Well, I don't mean to interject, but before you had come to the West Coast, I want to stop us before we get too far along and transition us over to the March, to your work in Selma. The March to Selma.
Okay, let's do that
let's
before
kind of
we get to
rotate back.
Because getting back to that, what had happened during that time, I had joined the evening newspaper. I was working part-time
at the city college.
At the college. Yeah. But in order to take reduced credits, the evening session, which doesn't exist any longer in the school, but they existed back then, you could continue taking half the credits that you normally would take, which would be like 18 or 22 credits, might be a full supply of classes. But if you were in the evening, you could take half of that and still continue with your regular degree. It would be slower, but you could continue there. And that allowed me to work outside and also allowed me to be on the newspaper. And because I didn't have as much of a load, because there are many reporters who flunked out of classes because they spent more time doing their reporting than they did taking their
the
classes.
core, the common core, math and English and all that fun stuff.
And I was pretty serious about, getting through my physics degree, but I also wanted to enjoy myself.
You're living life of two minds at this point.
Oh, absolutely. But no difficulty. To me, it was there was no discrete transition between them. To me, newspapers, photography was part of the same intellectual experience that my physics is. I saw it the same way.
Okay.
It was partly analysis, inspiration, and it had its own mix of the pleasures of technology in both areas. I was always interested in the technology of photography as well as the aesthetics of it. And so here I was in college. We were coming up around 64, and I had already cut my teeth a bit by doing the March on Washington,
63, right?
Whose photographs have never seen the light of day at this point.
Really?
I have so many things.
I was going to ask you about that too.
Let me tell you how many fabulous things I have buried that I need to bring out.
It seems like your whole archive is just this. Somebody threw away the key long ago, and you're slowly getting further and further in.
I'll tell you how some of that stuff is coming out. But 63 was the March on Washington,
right,
which technically was not a march. It was a gathering, assembling at the Lincoln Memorial,
right,
where everyone got on the mall, and you had like 100,000 people, at the mall, and so I went around. That was my first big event, at that point, and I wandered around, cutting my teeth on, trying to capture a sense of what this event was about, and moving in, and seeing Dr. King and other luminaries. I'm just beginning to learn about how to cover. This is an extraordinarily difficult event to cover, unlike later on with the Selma March, where you were right up with people,
right,
close. This was 100,000 people there, and you were trying to isolate individual events and people, right, and trying to get a sense of what it was all about. So I had disciplined myself to try to get images that captured a sense of what that was all about. So that was a couple of years before, and then back to college, I was doing good workmanship in the college itself to just cover stories and events. And then come around February of 1965, I'd been in touch with many of the civil rights group in college, Congress of Racial Equality, CORE, NAACP, SNCC, other groups, because they were very active at the college, and some of them had sent people down to Mississippi to do the voting.
So they already had people going down.
They were going down, coming back, telling us what it was like down there.
Okay.
And we knew that things were developing in that area.
Something big was over the next hill. Yeah.
I also want to parenthetically remark that colleges then, especially City College, is totally the mind sensitivity and the sense of open spirit was totally different back then than what I see today. I photographed 5-6 years worth of events at my college. From the beginning, I was always photographing, always involved. And we would think nothing of inviting the head of the American Nazi Party, George Lincoln Rockwell, to come in and give a speech. The school was about 90% Jewish. And they thought nothing of inviting the head of the American Nazi Party to come in and spew whatever he had to say. No problem at all. We did not have people marching up and down protesting how terrible it is that this person is coming there to spew their hate. And they said, we want to hear the guy, and we'll give as much as we take.
Know thy enemy.
And, they'd ask tough questions to the guy, but no one prevented anyone from speaking. We had George Wallace, governors, Harry Truman, Malcolm X, Martin Luther King. You can go the full spectrum from one end to the other of different people. And I have never experienced any time that anyone was prevented from speaking, or someone getting up and saying, "I'm not going to allow you to spew your hate or your disagreeable speech." It just wouldn't have occurred to us. The idea is you're invited, you give them, but you have a give and take.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And I can show you photographs, of all the people that I covered there, and there was nothing like what you see today. I find that the anarchists and hate mongers on the left are just as bad as the ones on the right. They're denying freedom of speech, and they think that preventing someone's feelings from being hurt is a constitutional right, to stop someone from hurting your feelings. That never would have occurred to us.
Just completely outside of the purview.
No, so what? Live with it. People have different opinions. What they are. You don't have to agree with them, but you can't
act like it doesn't exist.
Right. Or say you are not allowed to say what you say. I find most of those students and people to be ill-informed about what a democratic open forum is really like. Berkeley, certainly back in the 60s, was far more, open at that time.
Yeah.
And as a matter of fact, that was also a period when I was developing my photography. When I came out here to take classes that summer of '64, some of the other things that happened is I quickly found myself in the middle of the free speech movement at Berkeley.
Oh, yeah.
Really? Okay.
Oh, yeah.
And, I had gotten an apartment. I had rented one near the campus. And then I wandered over to the campus, didn't know too much, and found out where some of the political activists had an office. And I wandered in and I said, "I'm a photographer, and I hear you have some interesting actions and events that are going to be taking place. Can you inform me, keep me up on what's going on?" He says, "Let's have your phone number and we'll give you a call when we're, ready to do something." I mean, it was very,
casual
about it.
Yeah.
And I'm standing there talking to him and I look up and I said, "That guy looks familiar. Who is that?" "Oh, that's Mario Savio." It was like,
God.
"Oh, that's interesting." And so everything was very informal back then. And a few days later, I get a phone call at about 2:00 in the morning. And they said, "Hey, Steve, we got a group getting together to march against troop trains that are going to the Oakland Army Terminal. Would you like to photograph it?" I said, "Fine, great." Got dressed, headed over there, and met up with, several hundred people. And they were going to march, as the troop trains were coming in, they were going to block them or do whatever they had to do. And I said, that's good practice, I thought, to record this. So, I spent the day with them, photographing, all different things, the troops, the people on the train. One of the things that when you look back at those photographs, you realize how well-dressed people were when they went to these marches.
Oh, yeah. I can imagine.
The girls looked like they were going to a date, rather than marching on,
Now it's about T-shirts and jogging pants.
Oh, yeah. It was totally different.
Did you find that the same as Selma? Years
yes,
earlier?
No. In Selma, most of the people, the gentlemen wear coats and ties for the most part.
Right. Top hats.
The word did go out, that dress well. There was I don't think there was a dictum, but there was a thing. We want you to look good.
An innate expectation.
Yes,
Yeah.
you're this is going to be seen by the world.
Right. And everybody, you knew that it was going to. Did you know on your way down there that it was going to be this big of a landmark, this milestone in history? Or was there any.
You knew it was big,
Yeah.
but the sensibility of history, while it's unfolding, it's extraordinarily difficult to really assess how important it is going to be. You can look around you, you can analyze, but you don't have a sense of how the rest of the world will view it.
Yeah.
You're in a cocoon, and you see what is happening around you. And I had to continually remind myself, this is history unfolding. Be aware of that. You may not realize it now because you're walking, you're marching, you're
in the moment
around you. And, you see Dr. King and you say, this is an important figure in this history. But they're right in front of you, and it's like,
and you don't yet know what level that's going to be.
You don't know how important it's going to be.
Right.
So I had to keep priming myself to be conscious of that. And of course, my situation with my film was the thing that was also driving me.
Yes.
My problem had been that I kept thinking I was going to get the film before the march. And what happened is that I was at home and the word came out, we're all going tonight to Alabama. And I'd been concentrating on planning everything, and I'd forgotten to go to the store, to get more films. I go to my refrigerator, and in there is like 13 rolls of film. And I go, that is not enough. And it was like 9:00 at night. And of course, nothing is open. So I said, well, when I get down to the Port Authority bus terminal, there's got to be a shop open. I get down there, nothing is open. This is not the present time when you get these 24-hour.
Right. There's no Amazon Prime. There's no Walgreens open all night.
Nothing there. So I go with my 13 rolls of film. The original plan was that we were going to go to Selma. And Judge Jackson, who was a federal judge, had a rule on the march, and he was dictating essentially how many people could march. And he was in consultation with the Justice Department. And the Justice Department in the U.S. Army said, we can only guard so many people, and we won't be able to protect more than an amount. And they decided it was going to be around 300 people. And the judge said, that's all I'm going to allow that will march there. All the other marchers coming from the different parts of the country have to join the march at a later stage, the day before they were going to enter into the state capitol in Montgomery. So all of a sudden we were redirected. Instead of leaving to go to meet everyone in Selma, they shifted over to the latter part of the march.
Okay.
That's why that happened. And actually, all the photographs you see of the very early part of the march only had a few hundred people in it. In Selma, you saw many more people, but they didn't go on the march.
Okay.
And as a matter of fact, when you're looking at my photographs, the way you can discern who actually went on the Selma march versus the people who came later is the people who went on the Selma march wore yellow vests that would show up, that the security people and the army people knew that they were on the march. If you see some of the pictures of John Lewis in some, I'll show you the pictures later. He's wearing one of those vests. And those tended to be the people who were in the early part of the march and continued through. People who just wore civilian clothes joined the march a little bit later. A little minor distinguishing thing that you can tell. But when we got redirected, we were redirected to a black school and a medical institution. It was a combination called the City of St. Jude, which was a Catholic school for blacks. And the campus still exists, and as a matter of fact, they have had some exhibition of my photographs there. And on campus, they have a permanent museum now for the Selma March, using many of my photographs on that campus. But the school's still around and still functioning. But their school grounds was where everyone came together the day before they went into Montgomery. And this is where the 25,000, everyone focused in on this. The 300 and then the other people, all the buses, landed in this one place.
Let me grab some context before you go on. So you're talking about the second day of the march is when the St. Jude?
No. The march was about 4 days.
4 days, okay.
And let's get back to New York.
Okay.
When I was getting there, joining the march, I and one reporter, Tom Kelly, arrived, took the train down to the Port Authority bus terminal, where all the local colleges that were sending people and also private individuals would wind up. So the terminal was filled with hundreds and hundreds of students and activists, meeting there. And each one was going to be assigned to different buses that were slowly coming in. These were rented buses, Trailways, Greyhound buses that would be taking them down to Alabama. And so there were all these people camped out in the terminal, kind of waiting for things to happen. People were coming down from Massachusetts and other places, coming in. People, Columbia University, Harvard University, all the different schools.
So they're just kind of coming
into the one. We're waiting. When are the buses coming? When are we going to leave?
And you're a part of this group?
Yeah, but I'm wandering around to see. Initially, my original plan was to photograph students from my college and then follow them through. That instantly evaporated when I realized this is a far bigger story than, a few students from my college. So at that point, I didn't have more films. So I had to be very careful rolls. What I was photographing there. A couple of shots.
I'm sorry. Just the one color roll too, right? Everything was black and white.
Everything in the beginning was only black and white. I had about 4 or 5 cameras. I had a Topcon 35 millimeter single lens reflex camera that looked a little bit like a Nikon. It was made by a Japanese company called Topcon. And I had on that a very good 50 millimeter lens and a fabulous 135 millimeter telephoto lens, which was the best lens I've ever owned. And then I had a Rolleiflex, which is a 2 1/4 camera, a twin lens reflex. And I had an Olympus Pen W, which is a super wide angle half frame camera. And it had a very good lens on that. And I had in that camera the finest fine-grain film made ever. It's called ADOX KB14, made by a German company. And the equivalent of ADOX KB14 to Panatomic X was like Panatomic X to Tri-X. Fabulous film.
And it is time to throw some love over to our sponsor, Glass Key Photo. Located at 1230 Sutter Street in the heart of San Francisco, this is the Bay Area's premier location for all things analog, from repairs, cameras, lenses, film, both brands known and the weirdly unique, shit that you've never even heard of. That's the place to go and check out. You can also pick up zines made by local artists from right here in the Bay and help support that world. They are open from 12 to 6 every single day, ran by two of the hardest working guys in the industry I know, Matt and Gordon. And, whatever you're looking for, this is a place to go and check out when it comes to film. Even if you're not from San Francisco, next time you're visiting, go and check it out. So yeah, again, that's at 1230 Sutter Street, San Francisco, California, and much love from StreetPX to everybody over there at Glass Key Photo. And you're just carrying all this around in just a big, heavy-ass backpack.
I have several bags. I have a little backpack, and then I have a small
like side pouch
camera bag. I remember I have it somewhere probably packed away, and it had a label on it that I had gotten on there from the 62 election, and all it said had a picture of Calvin Coolidge, and it says "Keep cool with Coolidge," and it was a fabricated sticker that Calvin Coolidge might have created.
Wow.
I remember all these little nuances, from that period. But anyway, I had that small camera bag, which had the film and some other lenses, and I had a larger bag to contain, other pieces. And I had the Rolly, I had a Leica, Topcon.
That's a lot of gear for one man to be carrying around.
It was a fair amount. But each of the cameras had different film.
Mm-hmm.
I had my regular film would have been mostly Tri-X, but then my father was in the motion picture industry, and he used to give me short ends from motion picture stock from films that had been shot. So I had weird film that was motion picture film, DuPont Superior 2, and other films that no one would have ever heard of because they're motion picture film, not still film. And I'd reload them into cassettes.
All still fully usable.
Absolutely great. It was very good film. And but each of them had their own sensitivity. So some would be 400 ASA, some would be 160 ASA.
That'd be complicated.
Then my other ADOX was ASA 50 or 20. Ooh. And so they had enormous differences in sensitivity. And that meant that when I picked up a camera and I knew what film was in there, I'd have to reset the shutter and f-stop to accommodate that. And that meant that they were quite different for different cameras. Mm-hmm. And I had to keep, adapting it, But I was pretty well trained. Mm-hmm. I used to train myself over the years, though I had exposure meters. Quite often you didn't want to spend the time to take out the meter, so that I would do something at the beginning of the day, put the meter away, and I would be able to, within a quarter or a half stop, I could look at a scene and say, this is the exposure.
Just eyeball it.
And I would eyeball it, and then I would adapt to each of the cameras. This is 3 stops different from this one. Mm-hmm. And I was continually doing that, but it was all very automatic. Mm-hmm. And when I look at my contact sheets, they're all very uniform.
Exposure all the way through.
Yeah. We also had another thing that worked in my benefit, and that is when we got to Alabama, it had rained the previous few days, and there were overcast skies, which was the best thing you could ever hope for.
Natural diffusion.
Absolutely diffuse light. And that meant that when you photographed people, both black and white people, you didn't have to adjust for strong shadows or anything like that, which if we had had a sunny day, God knows what the pictures would have looked like. Totally different. But by having that diffuse day, you couldn't have chosen a better situation.
Yeah.
Now it's complicated enough keeping track of all of your gear and obviously your film stock and everything, but you're doing this at a time when tensions are exceptionally high. I'd read somewhere that you weren't able to acquire film while you were there simply because it was unsafe to venture out.
Well, when I got down there, we got off the bus. I walked over to some of the security people. There were people from the Justice Department. There were Army people. And they were in a little group. And I walked over and I said, I'd like to, we were at the city of St. Jude by that point when we debarked. And I said, I'd like to find a camera store and pick up some film. And they said, we don't recommend you leave this. There are people out there waiting for people to come out of this the march, and we can't protect you. We can't send anyone with you.
Oh, wow.
Now, though I didn't experience during the march the violence, people must remember that that was the march that Viola Liuzzo and Schwerner and Goodwin were murdered when they left after the march. That was the final day of the march. They got in their car to leave, and that's when they were stopped by the Ku Klux Klan people and killed.
Right.
So that was real.
Yeah.
What they were
Ever
talking
present
about.
danger all the way around.
And so I had to make a decision, that I wasn't going to go for the film. Also, God knows how long it would have taken me to find a place, make it back.
Right.
So I had to instantly discipline myself.
Every image had to be
Essentially,
perfect.
every image was a one-off, except in those rare circumstances when it was such an important photograph, you'd want to have a backup.
Oh, yeah.
And there were just a few times when I did that. If you go through my contact sheets, every shot is a one-off, except for Dr. King when I'm behind him. And let me see if there's any other thing. I think hardly anything else had multiple photographs. Every shot not only was a one-off, it had to be composed and it had to be timed exactly right. There's one, and I sometimes give a little tutorial on how I took the photographs sometimes when I'm in schools. And I was at last year, I was at Roger Williams University, which is in Rhode Island. And the school flew me out there to give a talk as well as have my exhibition. And interesting enough is that on one of the days I was there, they lined me up to give talks for the art department, the history department, the camera club.
It makes sense because it's all together.
Yeah. Well, each one was a little bit different because the people who wanted to talk photography weren't interested in what the history
right. Your background and your experience helped tie all this together.
Exactly. Yeah. But one of the things when I was showing the photography people how instant timing is so important. One of the shots that I took, which is one of my favorite shots of the whole series, which is not the best-selling shot, but it's my favorite.
Never is.
Is a picture I took with my Rolly, which is of a Coke sign in the back of families. I call it my Things Go Better with Coke photograph.
Yeah. Yes.
And it has this beautiful, perfectly arranged family in front of it. I mean, I didn't arrange them.
It was just the situation, the moment.
The situation I hit at the right moment. And this is one of the rare times, I took the first photograph. I was walking along, saw it, and moved myself into position within a few seconds, took the picture, and then said, I got to back this one up. I cranked it, took the second shot. Second shot is totally different than the first shot.
Is that right?
The people are in exactly the same positions. Everyone is exactly where they are, except the heads are in different places. They're turned. The thing is, when I took the first shot, everyone was aligned. They were looking at the march, which was approaching them. So they essentially were aligned. So
and embedded into that
embedded
scene.
in there. 3 seconds later, the march is moving by, but some of the family are looking at the head of the line. Some people are looking at the middle of the line. Some people. So all of a sudden you get this dispersion of energy where the faces are no longer looking the same way.
Yeah.
It's like if you were looking at Rembrandt's Night Watch, where you have all the guards lined up. They're all looking in the same direction. They're aligned. If they were looking in different places like they were in my second image, the energy is diffused.
Right. Yeah.
And I show these two pictures side by side, sometimes flipping back and forth, and I say, why is the second picture less energetic photographically? Why is it less forceful as an image than the first one? And I have to show people how a few seconds can make an absolute difference. And that same family has been photographed by several other photographers. And over the years, I've tracked down other photographers who've been there, and they never kind of got it together. You know, they didn't hit it at the right moment. They got nice shots, but they're sort of also-rans in terms of the energy and focus and composition. Every shot that I took, I was looking as if there was a frame around it. And I was saying, what is the picture saying? How is the energy of the photograph focused? Where are they looking? What is the message?
Right.
And that had to be done in a fraction of a second. You know, you're sort of scanning your eye over the horizon in front of you, and you say, there's a possible picture. And then you move yourself into position, and then you have to hit it just the right moment when the faces are facing in the right direction. The light is doing this. The background is doing that. You know, you're taking a multitude of different contributions to the photograph that you have to think about. You say, should I use deep depth of field? Should I use a larger aperture opening and diffuse the background? You're doing this very, very quickly.
Yeah.
Very, very. And one of the things that I discipline myself about is don't talk to anyone. Don't break your stream of consciousness. You start talking to people, you'll wander off the focus. You will not be able to. It's only once or twice that I actually broke off to ask someone who they were.
So you did actually with a couple of people.
A couple of times I felt it was important. There was one of my photographs of a little black boy on the shoulders of this bearded fellow. And I said, how did this come about? You know, it was such an interesting picture.
Yeah.
I said, how did it happen? And it turns out, you know, he says, the boy hurt his foot, and he hoisted him on his shoulders to carry him along on the march. And I said, where are you from? And he said, Canada. And I said, long way to come. And I left it at that. I didn't want to get involved in it. So I said, thank you, and then moved on. Because
you're also dealing with the atmosphere and the conflict and the emotions that are just running rampant at this time. Like, how are you dealing with that?
Suppressed. I don't allow myself to get excited.
Just go into motor memory.
No. You have to be on autopilot. Yeah. You have to be looking for the scenes. You know, I kept a view around me. I had almost like a 360-degree field of view. I just kept scanning, waiting for things. I'd even see other photographers shooting the shots. I had a Look magazine photographer who trailed me for a while. His name is Karas or something like that. I forgot his name. Very well-known Look magazine photographer. And it turns out that when I photographed this one of the boy on the shoulders, he was 3 feet to my left. and took the same photograph, which shows up in Look magazine.
Oh, it does.
It is. Oh, you have a big full-page photograph in Look, but it's off slightly. You can see mine is straight on, and his is off. And I turned and looked at him, and I react differently than a Jim Marshall would react. Jim Marshall would say, you know, SOB.
If you choice words.
I know Jim. You know, and in my case, I was a young, aspiring photographer, and I knew he was professional from the magazine. And I turned and I say, "Oh, that's nice. He thought it was a good photograph. He's trailing me. I must be doing something right."
I feel a little
that's
flattered.
the way I looked at it. I was flattered that he was doing it. I wasn't bothered because my pictures were not competitive with his. I wasn't trying to sell it to another magazine.
Well, you're still a college student. I mean, stop finding your way in this
I'm
time.
learning my way. You know, and when I find a professional, a respected professional, trailing me because he likes my eye, I said, I'm doing something right.
You know?
And I got 13 rolls to do it with.
That's exactly. I moved along on the march, you know, following them, but I did something that other photographers I know had not done, and that is when the marches interacted with people who were watching. I had like one elderly gentleman from the march stopped, and you can see these elderly black women coming up, talking to him about what is this march about, you know, because it was all evolving at that point. And I have this sweet shot, you know, of the march going off into the distance and him stepping out of the march to talk to the elderly women. And I positioned myself so they were focused right on the women and him. And I said, got it. And I just moved on. I'll give you a classic case, which took a fair amount of self-discipline. To talk about the story of how I took the Martin Luther King photograph. The positioning of the platform, this was actually a truck flatbed that had been placed in front of the bottom steps of the state capitol. That was the platform in which all the speakers' platform was located. In front of that was about 10 or 15 rows were all reporters. And they were from all over the world. In back of that began the actual marchers.
Participants.
Going way out, 25,000, going way out into the distance. Positioned a couple hundred feet away was a platform with a CBS News camera on it there. And they probably had a video camera, and that would go back to the studio. And in order to record it, they would do a kinescope. And what is a kinescope? Well, they didn't have video recorders in those days. So they had a high-resolution video monitor, and they had a motion picture camera photographing the image on the video, and that became a reproducible film that they could then send out to the stations. And that was called a kinescope. And that's how I wound up getting the photograph of myself photographing Dr. King.
Right, I was going to say
that was CBS News when I had my exhibit in New York at the New York Historical Society. CBS covered it. CBS News covered my opening. And the producer came over to me and said, I had just done research on you and went into our archives, and we found the photograph. We've been photographing Dr. King's speech, and he ran it through until he saw me lifting up my camera. And so he pulled a couple of those images out and sent them off to me.
And there's also video of you right behind him trying to maneuver for position.
Oh, yeah.
Just chin up. Get in here.
Well, I've
Dr. King
been
right in front of you.
working for a number of years trying to find such images.
Right.
And I'm connected, I also market my work through Getty Images. And I went into the Getty files and I said, do you have any, you have millions of photographs. Did anyone photograph me? And the only photograph we got was one where you can just see my hand with my camera, holding, but not me.
Oh,
So we got that, and I said, well, that's not good enough yet. There must be something better out there. And then when I had the exhibition, this showed up, and I go, wow, this is perfect.
That's a mantelpiece to
wow.
It is. But to get back to the image, what was going on is I, like all the other photographers who were photographing Dr. King, we were in that first front row. And there was a bunch of us, 5, 6, 7, whatever it was, trying to get the best shots of King. And I had knocked off a few what I thought were very nice ones. And then I took one directly in front of him, which was like a halo of microphones.
Yeah.
And I said, oh, beautiful shot. And then I looked at it at that instant that I took the picture, and I said, how is anyone going to know that Dr. King is speaking to 25,000 people? He can't tell from this photograph. What photograph do I have to take to show that? And in an instant, I knew the photograph I wanted. I knew exactly where I was going to position myself. I knew what lens I was going to use, the focal length, everything. In one instant, I knew how to do it. Bent down, took the camera I was going to use, the backup camera, made sure that they were at the right exposure, walked along the bottom of the platform. It was empty there because the photographers were holding back to look up at Dr. King.
Yeah.
And there was a set of stairs at the end. Just walked up the stairs, walked by the big guards and everything that King always had there.
All the iconic figures around him. Yeah,
right. Some of them were guards, for him. And but they knew who I was.
Yeah, they knew your purpose. Yeah.
And I just walked behind everyone until I got right back in back of Dr. King. And I said, you got 30 to 45 seconds to do this. You can't stay there doing it. And you've got 3 positions you're going to take: left, center, and right. And I started off on the left side, and I photographed him looking that way, photographed on him, allowed the background to go slightly out of focus. Then I got directly behind him, and I said, lock on the crowd with the lens, photograph him, let him go slightly out of focus, then take one that it's not going to be a good shot, focus on the back of his head. I wanted one just as a record shot. I knew
It's a personal
shot
thing.
with the people going out of focus would not be a good shot.
Right.
It had to be sharp on the people listening to him. Then I moved to the right and took a view there. I did a rolly shot of that. And then I said, done. He's still talking. He's going to talk for another 10, 15 minutes.
Yeah.
And I said, you are finished
'Cause
with Dr. King. And I said, there are other shots to be done. Go find them.
Yeah.
I said, you've done what you can do. Anything more is icing on the cake.
Right.
It will not improve whatever you're doing. You can't go back and stand behind them, So I backed away, walked to the back of the platform, and looked over. The state capitol was in the back, the steps going up. And I look, and there's Joan Baez. And Joan is standing, in front of the front steps, waiting to go on after Dr. King. And she's standing there, and I look up, and I see this line of state policemen on the top steps. And I look down at her, and I look up. I said, there's a great shot there. King is still talking. I walk to the end of the platform, walk down, get off the platform. King is giving his speech. Part of my ear hears him speaking. I said, don't pay any attention. Walked around the back, saw Baez, and I said, let's get the right position here. And I walked in front of her. First took a shot with a policeman walking by. I said, might be interesting, maybe not. And then I saw her in front of the Capitol. I lined up my eye, and I could see I wanted the state troopers to go right across the top. Mm-hmm. Then I said, which camera? State Capitol was right in front, yeah. So it was big. I said, I need a wider angle lens. My normal lenses would cut everything off. Yeah. So I went to my little half-frame camera.
A little pen?
The little Olympus Pen W with the ADOX KB14. And I said, that's the camera. Now, that camera does not have a rangefinder on it. I had a separate little rangefinder on it there, and it had click stops for the 7.5 feet, 15 feet, infinity kind of thing. And I quickly did an estimate of the distance, set it f/5.6, 250th of a second. That was it, the exposure. And then I positioned myself and went click, took it. It was 72 frame camera because it had 36 exposure half frame. Mm-hmm. So I could take a couple of shots there with it. And I positioned her just where I wanted it. I knew the rest of it would be cut out. The important thing, the distance that you're working determines what the relationship of the foreground figure to the background. Right. So I wanted that to be exactly right, and the rest I'd crop out. Took the shot and hoped that it would work.
Click and pray.
It wasn't until, got home, developed it in a special fine-grained film called Rodinal, which was a classic 1930s developer, but it was meant to be used with super fine-grain film. Didn't have any etching to reduce grain because the grain was so fine you didn't have to have that in there, so you could get the best out of it. Also
an infinite shelf life.
Yeah, well, it was a remarkable developer. I still probably have some at home. And when I developed it, the exposure turned out to be spot on. Yeah, and then eventually, in order to make a real print of it, in those days there was no digital. When I was doing it back in the 60s, the picture was so small. On the half, it was like half of a half frame, so it'd be a quarter frame, that when I made an enlargement that was like an 1114 or a 1620, my enlarger had to be like 8 feet up in the air. I mean, it was just enormous. We shoved this thing up as far as it could go. I mean, because we were doing so small. There was no grain.
Right.
There was no grain.
Smooth
it just
silk.
kept going, and I made these beautiful prints, like that.
And this is at ADOX.
Yeah. But years later, when I scanned it, of course, then I don't have to worry about that. Yeah. But that negative held up fabulously. But I remember doing those first photographs and printing them in, it was a friend of my father who had a darkroom in this hotel in Manhattan, the Sheraton Hotel on Lexington Avenue. And as a matter of fact, to show you how things connect, while I was doing this enlarging to get the Baez picture, I'm hearing music out of the, during the, of course, a several-hour period I'm doing this, and I'm hearing this music, and I said, oh, that's pretty good jazz music, and I said, someone has a good player, and I'm working on the print, and I'm saying, that's not a recording, that's a real thing. Stop. Put the paper back in the safe. The light safe. I said, I got to look for this. Something told me I should go look for that. So I pull my rollie out, and I walk out of the dark room, and I follow the sound. And I wander down the hallway, and there's a door. Now, I knew that the hotel also had rehearsal studios in it, which was very often used by musicians. So I saw the door, and I opened up the door. It was open. I look inside, and there's Duke Ellington.
Oh,
yeah. Rehearsing, And I said, "Oh, that's interesting." So I open up the door and I sort of step in, and there's a guy by the door. "Hey, kid," the guy by the door says, "What are you doing?" And Ellington at that moment looks up and says, "Let the kid in."
Oh my God!
Wait a minute! I'm in the same room now with the guys with Ellington. Yeah.
So Ellington is rehearsing his people, admonishing them, working with them. So I just spent the next hour. I had one roll of film. It was 12 exposures in the Rolly. And I said, let it count, So I started moving around Jimmy Hodges and some of the other guys and go, snap, that's one, and just parsing it, as I go around trying to do it. And then Ellington was sitting he had his overcoat on. He hadn't started full rehearsals yet. Had his overcoat on, and he was just sitting on a table, like a bench. And, I started knocking off a few shots of him. It looked so different. It's not the normal savoir-faire, Ellington. This was, a little grungier. And it was kind of just, lots of fun. And let's see if I have that in here. I know somewhere in here. I got a whole. There's one of the shots.
Oh my God! We are looking at this image of Duke Ellington sitting in his overcoat. Oh my God!
Wow!
And then I have all these other shots of them at rehearsal.
Yeah, just on a happenstance situation.
Getting an award from a French jazz magazine, Le Jazz Hot, it's called. And, so there I was with, also his biographer was there, Stanley Dance, who's his personal biographer, giving him the award. And I have those pictures, and I said, oh, that's nice, a little history. And then back to the darkroom.
Huh?
I said, got that. Now get back to your printing.
Nice little moment of distraction.
And that was in 65 or
60?
No, 60. This is probably 60. Yeah, it could have been 65 or 66. Depends on when I was doing that particular print.
Okay.
All right, folks, we hope you've been enjoying this fantastic interview with Stephen Somerstein. And now I have to take on that awkward task of bringing this part one to a close. But fear not, we have plenty more to discuss. And part two is already being polished up and ready for the digital airwaves. That one should be published here very, very soon. Now, in the meantime, be sure to head over to somerstein.smugmug.com. That's SOMERSTEIN. And from there, you can see more of Steve's iconic imagery. You have to check this out. You simply have to. And if you want to catch up with all things StreetPX, don't forget to go over to StreetPX.com. That's where you're going to find all of our show notes on all of our episodes, but particularly this episode is going to have an extensive list of links for any of the artists that were mentioned here, the articles that we discussed, and many of the galleries that are available to view Stephen's work. We're going to link from the show notes there. So definitely check that out. In addition, you will also find nearly 100 hours of archive discussions with photographers from around the world. And if you are a photographer from around the world, definitely give us a call. Email us at contact@streetpx.com. We'd love to have you on. And if you want to help support the show, be sure to head over to patreon.com/StreetPX, and you can give $1, you can give $5, whatever it is. It goes back into helping us keep these mics hot and the bandwidth flowing. Also, if you haven't heard enough babbling by yours truly here, there's one more thing I want to note. Go check out another great podcast. It's called The Art of Creative Photography. That one's hosted by Kai Berman. You can find it at artofcreativephotography.com. He took on the unique task of asking yours truly to come in and sit down and tell my story, which I have to admit was a weird experience, having the interview turned back on me, but a blast all the same. And I believe that one's coming out on Thursday, February 22nd. So above all, thank you all so much for listening. We have so much more to talk about, and we will be talking back at you very, very soon. Cheers.